Oh, good morning, mindful parents. My contention is that you are already mindful parents if you are making the time to spend an hour talking about this subject and thinking about this subject, that you're already somebody who's trying to parent your teens with attention and intention and presence. So what we're going to do today, what we're going to talk about in the next hour is several things. We're going to talk a little bit about why teens act the way they do, and it has to do with what's going on in terms of their development and what's going on in their brain. Then we're going to talk about how mindfulness can help us as parents. Then I'm going to give you some tools and practices that you can use with your teens. And then finally, we're going to end with a meditation. So, and actually I wanted to start with the meditation to get us all present. So if you would close your eyes and take a deep breath. And pay attention to your breathing. Notice how when you exhale and inhale, your breathing gets slower. And focus on your breath. Where do you feel your breath most? Is it at the tip of your nose? Is it in the back of your throat? Is it in your chest or belly as it rises and falls? Notice where you feel your breath most. And allow your breath to make you feel calmer and more relaxed. And now pay attention to your body. So turn your attention inward and notice what's going on in your body. Notice if there's any tension or tightness, and just let that go. So let that tightness and tension drain out of your body. Maybe it's tension around your brow, maybe it's tension in your jaw or your shoulders, but with each breath, allow yourself to relax more and to let that tightness and tension drain away. And now, as you continue to breathe deeply and to become more and more relaxed, bring a smile to your lips. So just let the ends of your lips turn up. Maybe you notice your eyes, the sides of your eyes scrunching up. But just smile. And then notice if when sitting there in that relaxed state with a smile on your face, if you can find some joy or contentment inside, just a glimpse. See if there's a glimpse of joy or happiness or peace or contentment as you sit in this relaxed state, breathing gently, allowing a gentle smile on your lips. And now, I'd like you to open your eyes and bring your attention back to the webinar. So I enjoyed doing that, made me feel more present and as if I've arrived here. So hopefully you feel the same. So as I said, we're going to talk about how mindfulness can help us to parent teens. And this webinar is based on a workshop that I have been teaching for the last 7 years. And then I have written a book on the curriculum of the workshop. And the workshop came about because I'm a coach and I had a business partner who's a therapist. And both of us were parents of teenagers, and we're talking about the challenges of raising teens. And both of us had used mindfulness practices with our clients and our patients, and we both meditated, but we hadn't yet deliberately brought those skills and tools to our parenting. So this whole body of work is based on the idea that if we can stay calmer and less reactive as parents, then our teens are going to be calmer and less reactive. Because calmness is contagious. If we can stay in a state of equilibrium, our kids are more likely to be in a state of equilibrium. So I want to have you think for a moment. Conflict is an inevitable part of being parents of teenagers, and we're going to talk about why that is. But I just want you to think for a moment, how would your household be different if there were less conflict? So just imagine if there weren't as much conflict with your teenager, how would your home be different? So when we ask this question in the workshop, the answers that we get are things like, it would be more peaceful, it would be more calm, it would be more fun, we might be more connected, we might spend time that's more constructive instead of time where we're arguing with each other. So I think you can see how conflict in a home creates a dynamic that not all of us want. And so if we can come up with ways to have less conflict with our teenagers, we're going to have homes that are more like what we want, which is peaceful and connected and fun. So there's a reason why there's so much conflict with teenagers, and I'm going to go through a couple slides here. And it's a combination of what's going on in terms of their psychological development and also what's going on with their brain. So I want to start by talking about their psychological development. So what happens with teenagers is they are going through the process of getting to a point where they are autonomous adults. So we all want our teenagers to ultimately be autonomous, which is both separate and connected at the same time, both to us as parents and to other people. But in order to get to that healthy state of autonomy, they have to go through two sequential and predictable stages, which are differentiation and individuation. So differentiation basically aligns with the middle school years. And this is when they start going through puberty and they start psychologically asking themselves the question, who am I? So during this time, there's several things that are going on. The first is that there are a lot of physical changes. And, you know, if you have seen a class of middle schoolers, you know that some kids start developing really early, like 11 or 12, and others don't begin until maybe 14 or 15 years old. So one of the things to be aware of as a parent is that most kids are acutely aware of where they fall on that developmental spectrum. So they know if they're ahead or behind their peers, and it's likely that they feel a lot of shame and embarrassment regardless of where they are on the spectrum. So, you know, as a parent, there's nothing we can do about that, but the important thing is to know that that's a really sensitive thing and to not contribute to making them feel more embarrassed or ashamed of where they are. And if they do indicate that they have some discomfort around it, to be available and to listen to them and to show empathy towards them. But just know that this is a really hard time for most kids, in part because of what's going on in terms of their physical development. The other thing that happens during the differentiation phase is they start caring much more about their peers and what their peers think about them. So this can be really hard for parents because up until now, they've really cared about what we think. They really want our approval and want to belong as part of a family. But what happens at this stage is they start looking out to their peer group for approval, a sense of belonging, for identity. And that can feel really personal as a parent, feels like they're rejecting us, which in some ways they are, but it's because they have to go through this process to figure out who they are. So then the second phase of this process of becoming an autonomous adult is individuation, and this roughly aligns with the high school years. And this is a time when they're, again, asking the question, who am I? You know, if I'm not who I was when I was a little kid, and I'm not my parents, because I don't even like my parents, then who am I? So this is a time when their cognitive abilities are really developing at an accelerated rate. So they can have very sophisticated ability to reason, to do complex problems, to run circles around us in an argument. At the same time, they're much more impulsive and much more into experimentation. So the experimentation can take all sorts of forms. It can be everything from experimenting with substances or sexuality, or it can be less dangerous kinds of experimentation, like a child who has played on a soccer team for 5 years, all of a sudden decides they don't want to have anything to do with soccer anymore, and they want to become part of the drama department. So it's very common for kids to change interests at this stage. It's very common for them to want to, dye their hair or have more piercings. It's also common for them to take different political views than their parents, to challenge us on all sorts of things. And so as a parent, the thing to remember is that this isn't a rejection of us personally. It's part of that process of individuating, and that as parents, what we should do is support them in experimenting with things that are healthy, and protect them from that kind of experimentation that's unsafe. So part of the reason this period, this differentiation and autonomy, is so difficult for parents is that the period of child development before this is called latency, and it roughly aligns with ages 5 to 11. And this is the most psychologically uncomplicated phase of an entire life. So this is a time when your kids are, they're easy to be with, they want to please, they're, interested in learning new things, they're up for adventures, they're basically very pleasant to be with. And so it seems like overnight, this differentiation phase happens, and it's like a switch is flipped, and all of a sudden they're oppositional, they're cranky, they're grumpy, and it's a real shock to a lot of us as parents to have that happen so quickly. So what we need to keep reminding ourselves is that this is a normal process and a necessary process for them to become autonomous adults. And that period of autonomy roughly corresponds with college. And by age 22, 23, 24, most of them are autonomous. So, so hopefully understanding a little bit about this, what's going on psychologically and developmentally, allows you to take this behavior less personally. At the same time as these sort of massive psychological changes are happening, there's also changes that are going on in the structure and the function of the brain. So the two parts of the brain that are relevant for this conversation are the prefrontal cortex, which is the front of the brain, and is also known as the reflective part of the brain, and the amygdala, which is at the base of the brain and is the reactive part of the brain. So the amygdala is fully developed as soon as we're born, and it's the place that's responsible for reflexes like blinking and breathing. It's also where fear and anger reside, and this is the place where a flight or fight response starts, because the amygdala's job is to be scanning the environment at all times for threats and dangers. So this is very adaptive. When we were, living, hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we were living, out on the plains, it was important that if you saw a tiger out of the corner of your eye, you reacted immediately and got yourself away from that tiger, that threat, that danger. So the issue with the amygdala today is that we aren't often in danger in a physical way, but the dangers and the threats to us are more psychological. Somebody insults us, or somebody says something that we think is disrespectful, or calls us a name. So what happens, and this can happen to anybody, a child, an adult, a teen, is when something comes at us that we perceive as a threat, we respond reflexively. So the amygdala is the part of your brain that's responsible for, say you're walking along and you trip and fall, your hands reach out to stop you before your brain even computes that you're falling to the ground. So again, this is a really important, and it's a really important function, but it doesn't always serve us well. And that's in part because the prefrontal cortex exists to put the brakes on what goes on with the amygdala. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that allows us to think before acting. It's the part of the brain that's responsible for executive functioning. So functions like planning ahead, understanding consequences of an action, having some moral sense of what our actions imply. Another thing that the prefrontal cortex does is to help us plan and look ahead. It also is responsible for a function that is my particular favorite, called prospective memory. And that is the ability to remember to do something in the future. So for instance, to remember to turn your completed homework in tomorrow rather than leaving it in a crunched up ball at the bottom of your backpack. So what's going on in the prefrontal cortex for teens is that it's in the process of developing. So whereas the amygdala, that part that reacts immediately, is fully developed when you're born, the prefrontal cortex is maturing over the course of your adolescence, and brains aren't fully mature, we know now, until age, on average, 25. So it's important to note that you as the parent with the fully developed prefrontal cortex sometimes have to play the role of a surrogate prefrontal cortex. So you're the one who might say to your teenager, what are the steps you need to take in order to get that paper done in 2 weeks? Or how do you think that made your third friend feel when she saw the Instagram picture of the other two of you? So your job as a parent is to understand that their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, and that their amygdalas are more active than a child or an adult. And the way this can sometimes play out is that when they feel threatened, the amygdala takes over, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, and they literally can't think or hear what you're saying. So it's not the time to have a conversation about what is happening when the amygdala is firing. An amygdala flooding is another way that's another term for that. So you want to make sure as a parent that you have conversations with your kid when both your amygdala and their amygdala are more calm. So I know that's a lot of information, but I think it's really useful to know about their psychological development and their brain development, because it allows you to see why they act the way they do. You know, an example of an amygdala taking over inappropriately might be that you say to your child in your nicest possible voice, "Sweetheart, can you bring your dish from the table to the dishwasher?" And they turn to you and they say, "Why are you always yelling at me?" And the reason they do that is because their amygdalas are more active and they perceive what you're saying to them as a threat. It's something they don't want to do, or they feel judged by what you're saying. So it's just important to understand this dynamic, because it gives us some insight into why they act the ways they do. And it can help us to stay calm when we start seeing their amygdala firing up, to say to ourselves, you know, I don't want my amygdala to become activated too, so I'm going to try to stay calm in this situation. So we're going to talk next about how to do that and how mindfulness can help with that. So I have a definition here of mindfulness from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who many of you know, and he's kind of the grandfather of mindfulness and meditation in the United States. He's a physician in Boston who was also a Buddhist and had a meditation practice, and he started bringing meditation and mindfulness into hospital settings to help people manage chronic pain and stress. And so his definition of mindfulness is that mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So just think about that for a moment. And why is meditation important? Meditation is important because it is the path to mindfulness. The more we meditate, the more we become able to reduce stress, to become more present, and to develop more insight and wisdom into ourselves. And so why are those things important for parents of teenagers? So I'm going to just talk a little bit about each of those. The first is stress reduction. So parenting a teenager is hard. It's there's so many things that we need to be aware of. We no longer have control of them. They are faced with a world that's very complicated. All the influences of social media, the sort of addictiveness of devices. There's a lot that teenagers are dealing with. And so there's a lot as parents that we're dealing with. So anything that can help us reduce our stress is important, because it will help us stay calmer and less reactive to the triggers that are coming our way all the time. So I'm sure many of you already know the benefits of meditation, but there are physical benefits, like it improves heart health, it can reduce blood pressure, it can improve your immune system, and it can give you a subjective sense of well-being. And then the final thing that I think is really important, especially given our conversation earlier about the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, is that people who meditate over time on brain scans show more activity in the prefrontal cortex and less activity in the amygdala. So reducing stress is a really key thing for parents of teenagers. The second thing is that meditation it invites us to be present. So if we're meditating, say, on our breath or on our the sensations in our body, or we're paying attention to our thoughts and emotions as we meditate, what we're doing is paying attention to what we're doing as we're doing it. And that's a really important thing, because as a parent of teenagers, there are all sorts of opportunities for worry and concern. And as you know, when we're not in a mindful state, when our monkey brain is taking over, often what we're doing is worrying about the past or ruminating about the future. And those activities are often based in fear and anxiety. But if we bring our attention to the present, often what's going on in the present is actually okay. You know, right now I feel pretty good. If I'm not fixated on the things that have already happened or what might happen with my teenager, and can just be present to where they are right now, I might see that everything is pretty good. The other thing is that when you're in the present, you enjoy the moment more because you're paying attention to what's going on. So, you know, if I walk out my front door and I'm in the moment and I see that the rose bush outside my front door is in bloom, that gives me a moment of joy and a ability to appreciate beauty. And that makes me feel better and more content instead of just rushing through life and not appreciating those good things along the way. So how this might work with or look with a teenager is, say your teen comes to you with a D on a math test. And if you let the monkey mind go, you might start thinking, you know, I knew he should have studied more for that. I saw that he wasn't putting in the time that he should have, you know, looking at the past, seeing where they went wrong, being judgmental and critical about how they got to this point. And then we spin out in the future, well, this D on the math test means they're not going to get into honors math next year. And that means they're not going to get into a good college and they won't get a good job and they'll end up homeless and destitute on the street. And I know that sounds extreme, but our minds go there easily. And so if we can just stay present to the fact that, you know, they got a bad grade on one test, then we can be more realistic about how we might work to problem solve the situation. You know, maybe we see that they need to spend more time on math. Maybe we decide they need to work with a tutor. But it's sticking with what's going on now and not letting yourself get caught up in what could or might not happen in the future. And then the final thing about why meditating and mindfulness is important with teenagers is that when we are meditating and being mindful, we are becoming more aware of our own internal process. So we're becoming more aware of our thoughts and emotions, and we're getting a little more distance on them. We're able to see our actions with some perspective and perhaps insight, which allows us to act with more choice with our teens and with our teens. So reduces stress, brings us to the present, and helps us develop insight. So I want to take a moment to have you do a visualization about a situation with your teen that you found difficult. So if you could close your eyes and just relax into your chair and think about a time in the recent past where your teen upset you. So maybe they said something rude to you, maybe they defied a request that you made, maybe they called you a name that you didn't like. Whatever it is, just find a situation in the recent past where your teen really pushed your buttons. So now think about this situation in detail. Notice where you were. Notice who said what. And then look inside and notice what emotions came up for you. Were you angry? Were you concerned? what were the emotions that were present when you were having this conflict or moment of dis-ease with your teen? And then what thoughts were present? What were you thinking about your teenager when you had this conflict with them? I can't believe they're so disrespectful. They're never going to amount to anything because they don't know how to act around other people. What were the thoughts that came up for you? And now we're going to end this visualization by making a closed fist and imagine that any residual bad feelings are in that fist. And then just slowly open your fist and let any of those feelings go. And then just take a moment to answer these questions for yourself. Were you able to identify the thing that triggered you? Just give some thought to that. And then can you put labels on the emotions that came up? Can you identify where you felt these feelings in your body? And then how did these emotions drive your behavior towards your teen? And then what did you learn from this exercise? So hopefully what you saw is that there are certain behaviors that your teens do that trigger you. And then when you're triggered, there are physiological responses in your body. You might feel flushed cheeks, you might feel your heart beating quickly, you might feel the hair standing up on the back of your arms. And those are signals that you're having an emotional response. And then hopefully you were able to label what those emotions were and see how when you're in that emotional state, it drives your behavior in ways that may or may not be constructive with your teen. So the reason to go through an exercise like that is to just become more aware that there are sort of early warning signals that if we pay attention to them, let us know that we're about to enter into conflict with our teen, and that doing so often isn't the most skillful way to act. So what I want to talk about now is some of the things you can do when you feel that conflict coming on. You know that you're agitated. You know that you're in your amygdala is starting to fire. It's likely that your teen's amygdala is firing, and rather than entering into a conflict, which will inevitably get worse, what I advise is that you purposefully disengage. So this doesn't mean disengaging from your child. It means disengaging from the argument or the fight that's about to happen because you notice yourself having all these signals that you're agitated and you're about to engage in behavior that isn't going to be skillful. So there are several ways to do this. The first way that I recommend is to pause and breathe. So this literally means taking a deep breath, stopping and breathing. And often just one deep breath can bring oxygen to your brain. It can trigger your body's parasympathetic nervous system, which is your soothing response. And it gives you a little bit of time, just a brief amount of time, to make a choice about how you want to respond to your teen in that moment. So an example of this is they might come to you with some requests that you find outlandish, like, I want to go to a co-ed sleepover. And rather than just saying, no, absolutely not, that's never going to happen, just that reactive negative response, you might pause and breathe and say something like, I have to think about that. Or, I'm not ready for that yet. So this also works when you're sending emails or texts. An example that I give about me and my own daughter is one day she was heading off to school and I said to her, can you do these 2 things today? And so halfway through the day, I got a text from her that said, Mom, I did thing 1. And so my immediate response is, and I typed it out in the text screen, was, well, did you do the second thing? And then I read it and I thought, is that the message that I want to send? And I said, so instead of sending a nagging message, I sent, oh, thank you so much. Heart, 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 dancing girl, dancing girl, dancing girl. And then she sent a text back with, cat with the Valentine eyes and lots of hearts. And then I sent her back another one. So we had this little exchange, which was a moment of connection instead of conflict, because I was able to step back and take a pause before I sent the text. The second way, the second level of disengagement, I just noticed that my battery is low, so I want to make sure that my computer is plugged in here. So hold on 1 minute. Okay, so the second way to disengage is to talk less. And this is a really hard thing to do as a parent, because there's a part of us that feels like we only have so much time with our kids. We're looking at their leaving to go off to wherever they go in a few years. And so we have this sense of urgency about wanting to teach a lesson or wanting to rationalize why we're asking them to do something, or to make a point about why they need to do this because we want them to become a decent human being. So we tend to, when they resist something that we want them to do, or we say no to them, we tend to talk a lot about why what we're saying makes sense. So if you can limit your responses, stick to the mission, and talk as little as possible, you will find that that can be a very effective way to disengage. So one strategy is called broken record, and this is just repeating what you want over and over again in a calm, neutral voice, and not engaging in all the side arguments about what a bad parent you are, how nobody else ever has to do this, how I'm the only kid who has these kinds of responsibilities or jobs, and you're a loser, you never went out when you were in high school, so that's why you wouldn't let me go to this party. You don't have to come up with creative responses to any of those arguments. You just stick to your mission. So an example might be, you say to your daughter, sweetheart, can you take your papers off the dining room table so we can set it for dinner? And they come back to you with some argument about having too much homework or them doing all the work around here. And you just say, can you please take the papers off the table? And then they come back to you with the arguments about how, no one else in the family does any of the work, only they do. And there's too much going on. They don't have time to do chores. And you just say, can you please take the papers off the table? And then they come back to you. You don't engage with their arguments. You say, papers, table. They come back to you and you say, please, could you do that? And the thing is, if you do this, you will wear them down. But actually what's happening is that you aren't giving them someone to argue against. You know, they're not getting the response that they want. And so they will eventually, probably not happily, but eventually do as you ask. Another way to get yourself to talk less is to distract yourself. So if they're coming at you with all sorts of arguments or reasons why something isn't going to happen, to just get busy doing something else. You know, in your head, you can count backwards from 10 to 1. You could go over and start doing the dishes, but something that takes you out of the situation with them so that you're not compelled to engage. And then the next level of disengagement is to actually stop talking. So literally stop talking and being quiet. And this can have there are a couple things that can happen when you stop talking. The first is that most arguments between parents and teens are a power struggle. And ultimately they know that you have the power. So if you stop talking and you allow them to have the last word, they may save a little face. They may feel like they won the argument, but you have stopped the conflict from happening by letting them have the last word. The other thing that can happen is if the last word that they have is something mean or nasty or rude, you know, I hate you, Mom, you're the worst parent in the world. If you don't say anything to them back, then that's what's hanging out there in the air between you. And you all have kids who know right and wrong. You all have kids who know that saying, I hate you, Mom, is not a nice thing. But if you argue back, they make you the bad guy, and they don't take any responsibility for that mean thing that they've said. But if it's just hanging out there and you don't respond, then they have to sit with the discomfort of that. And those are the times where you might like have them come back later and say to you and apologize to you, because they realize that they don't want to be the kind of person that says those kinds of things or creates that kind of hurt with their parent. And then the final thing is to walk away. The final way to disengage is to literally leave, to absent yourself from the situation. And you don't want to do this in a dramatic way. You know, you don't want to leave and slam the door or get in the car and screech off down the street. You want to do it in as calm a way as you can, which is hard because you're probably agitated from this argument. But to say something like, I need to leave right now, this conversation isn't constructive anymore. Or I'm going to go to my room and go meditate. Or I'm going to go to my room and clear my head because this argument is not getting us anywhere. And again, you want to say those words because you don't want them to feel abandoned or betrayed by your walking away. You want to make it clear that you're leaving because it's the healthy thing to do in this situation, and you don't want to continue arguing with them. So finally, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of increasing positivity. And again, I'm going to just take one quick second to check the power here. I'll be right back. Okay, so increasing positivity. So there's a woman named Barbara Fredrickson, who's a professor, I think, in North Carolina, and she has done research for the last 20 years on positivity. And she did a meta-study where she looked at all sorts of other studies on positivity and came to the conclusion that the most healthy relationships are those where there is a 3-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions. So just think for a moment about what your ratio with your teenager is. And part of what goes on with teenagers is that we tend to hyper focus on the negative, and we forget to bring positive interactions into our back and forth with them. So I want to give you some things that you can do to increase positivity with your teen. So the first is to just say thank you. So part of Barbara Fredrickson's research shows that she was looking in companies, and she showed that in companies where people regularly thanked each other for their work, for their effort, there was 25% more creativity. And you can even imagine that for yourself. If somebody is thanking you, if somebody is acknowledging what you've done, it kind of opens you up. It makes you feel more creative. It expands your perspective. Whereas if you feel like you're not appreciated, you kind of shut down. So the important thing is to remember to say thank you to your teens. And you can do this like even for things that they should be doing, you know, even if it's their job to feed the cat, and you've asked them several times, when they actually do it, to acknowledge the effort and say, hey, thanks for feeding the cat, or thank you for coming down to dinner on time, or thank you for getting your homework done before 9 o'clock tonight. So acknowledging their effort for things, even if it's things that they're supposed to be doing. And then the second one is to catch them doing something right. And so again, we tend to sort of focus on the things that they're not doing, or that they, obligations that they're not fulfilling. And instead to just sort of change your orientation a bit and to catch them doing something right. So to make sure to acknowledge them when they do the right thing. You know, hey, that was great that you were so nice to your little brother when he was feeling sad last week, or thanks for coming along on our family outing. Your grandmother loves seeing you. You want to make sure that they get acknowledged for the effort that they are making, and also for qualities about them that you appreciate. You know, we tend to be complimentary when they perform in a way that we think is good. Hey, great job on the math test. But if you can also acknowledge them for sort of their qualities, their characteristics, that can really increase positivity. So you worked really hard to do well on that math test, or you're a really good friend, or you're a really kind person. I really appreciate how friendly you are. To just make sure that you acknowledge the positive aspects of their personality rather than hyper focusing on the negative stuff. The next thing to try is to say yes with enthusiasm. So there's a lot that we do for our kids all the time. And often they come and make a request of us, and we know we're going to do it anyway. So why not do it with enthusiasm rather than begrudgingly? So sure, I'd be delighted to take you across town to your violin lesson. Or yeah, go to that game with your friends. That'll be really fun for you. Or going out Friday night, can I give you some money? Anyway, the idea is we're going to be doing a lot of these things anyway. So if we're going to be doing them anyway, why not do them with joy and enthusiasm as opposed to feeling grumpy or resentful or put upon? And then another thing we can do is to provide some quick, reassuring touch. And you know, when they were little, we hugged them a lot, we kissed them a lot, it was very easy for us to have a physical relationship with them. And as they get older, that becomes less so. And a lot of them don't want to be touched, and you need to respect that. So this doesn't mean crawling into bed with them like you would when you read them a story, but it means maybe patting them on the back as they walk down the hall, or giving them a fist bump, or giving them a quick hug. But the idea is to just make that physical contact, because it does show them you care and that you feel affection for them. And here's the other part of this: don't expect anything in return. Don't expect them to think, don't expect them to say, you know, oh, I really appreciate that you just kiss me, or to even hug back when you hug. But you're doing it because it makes you feel more affectionate and you feel better about your relationship with them. And just let go of their response to it, because it's unlikely to be what you want. And then another way to increase positivity is something from a book called I'd Listen to My Parents If They Just Shut Up, which is by a guy named Anthony Wolfe. It's a great book. And he talks about this competing melodies in terms of, you know, teenagers can be grumpy and snarky and oppositional. So don't let them set the tone all the time. So an example of this might be that, you know, it's Saturday morning, you've gone to a lot of trouble to make your world famous French toast for breakfast, and they come down the stairs and they look at the breakfast and they say, I hate French toast. So rather than going down into that snarky place with them, you say, I love French toast. If I could eat French toast for every meal, I would do that. So it's this idea of kind of bringing silliness and upbeatness and funniness to your relationship with your teen, even if they're in that grumpy, oppositional, snarky place. And then finally, the last thing here is one act of kindness a day. So there's research that show that people who perform one act of kindness a day for another human being, one they know or one they don't know, for just a week actually increases their level of happiness and well-being. So what if, as an experiment, you decided to do one act of kindness per day for your teen and just see what happens, see what you feel. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It could be something like bringing them a cup of tea while they're studying, or making their favorite dessert for dinner for no reason. But doing one thing intentionally every day, an act of kindness for your teen. And to just do that to see the impact on you as much as the impact on them. So I want to end this, this part of the webinar with a meditation, and then we'll have time to ask some questions. So this will probably take about 5 minutes. So if you could sit comfortably in your chair and put both feet on the ground so you feel like the ground is supporting you, allowing you to be centered and solid. And hold both hands in your lap and close your eyes if you feel comfortable with your eyes closed. And take some deep, full breaths. And you want your exhale to be as long or longer than your inhale, because that activates your parasympathetic nervous system and soothes your body. So just keep taking some deep breaths. And let any tightness and tension in your body melt away. And now bring your attention to your body. Notice your body as a whole. How are you sitting? What's the temperature like? Can you feel the air on your skin? Notice any sensations that are going on in your body, and just let go of anything that isn't serving you. Now take a moment to Express appreciation for your body. So what are you grateful for your body? Your body is this miraculous organism. Your limbs, your bloodstream, your organs, all working together to keep you healthy and functioning. So what is it about your body that you're grateful for? Now you turn your attention to anything else that you're grateful for. So just take a moment to notice what in your life are you grateful for. Because practicing gratitude on a regular basis can decrease stress and increase happiness and well-being. And what if you were to express gratitude for everything in your life? Not just the good things, but the things that might seem bad or hard, because sometimes those are the things that provide us opportunities to grow and learn. So gratitude is saying a blessing for all things in your life. Now call to mind the people in your life that you're grateful for. So as you keep breathing gently and easily, bring your attention to all the people who positively impact you and support you. Your family, your friends, the people in your kids' schools, or other communities in which you're a member. Maybe you're grateful for the person who works in your local grocery store or delivers your mail. Even your ancestors and elders. Think of all the people that you're grateful for, breathing into your gratitude and appreciation for them. Now bring to mind your teenager. What is it about your tween or teen that you're grateful for? What qualities of theirs do you value and admire? So take a moment to reflect on how grateful you are that this person is in your life, and notice how they make you feel. Now reflect on the vast resources that are available to you. So call to mind the material things that you appreciate or make your life easier or you enjoy. What are the things that you're grateful for? And now let your mind explore the natural resources that you appreciate. The earth, the sky, the trees, the animals, the flowers. Whatever aspects of the natural world bring you joy and gratitude. Allow yourself to appreciate these things as you continue to breathe slowly and steadily. So finally, let your mind wander to anything else that you're grateful for. Take a few quiet, still moments to call to mind anything else that you appreciate in your life. We'll end this meditation by holding that feeling of gratitude. So let your heart be full of gratitude and joy and appreciation. And remember that you don't have to meditate to feel grateful. You can simply check in with yourself throughout the day and notice the things around you that you appreciate. Now bring your attention back to your breathing. Feel your body resting comfortably in your chair. Notice the ease of your breathing, the gentle inhaling and exhaling. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So as we bring this part of the webinar to a close, I just want to say how grateful I am to you for being here, for taking time to have this conversation about how to be a mindful parent. And my parting wishes for all of you are from a loving kindness meditation, which are, may you be safe and protected. May you be happy. May you be healthy and well. May you live with ease. So thank you to all of you. And we'll now open it up and see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Wynn. So I am just going to give some instructions. My name's Chella. I'm the program manager at Suraflow, and I'm just helping Wynn out today. So if you guys do have any questions, you can put up your hand. There's a little icon that allows you to put up your hand in the bottom menu, or you can type in the Q&A. Again, there's another icon that is called Q&A. And you can ask your questions in there. Or if you're not able to find either of those, you can also type in the chat box. So I will even write something in the chat box so that you can see it. And that way you're able to ask your questions. So we'll just wait here a couple of moments where you can feel free to ask any questions when you're ready. And thank you, Wynn. That was a wonderful, wonderful webinar.
So maybe people will come up with some questions or not. I just wanted to end by just letting you know that I have written a book called The Power of Mindful Parenting, and the subtitle is A Guide to More Connection and Less Conflict with Your Teen. And all the things that we talked about today are in the book, plus more. And as I said at the beginning, the book is based on a workshop, a course that I've taught for 7 years. It's a 6-week course. And so the things that are included in this book are skills and practices that have been road tested by other parents of teenagers. So it's really designed to be a practical, kind of concrete guide to help you stay connected to your teenager during which is without a doubt a really challenging time. So you can get the book on Amazon. You can ask for it at a bookstore. I have a website called Mindful Parenting of Teens, but check it out and I'd be delighted to hear what you think about it. thank you, and I appreciate your participation.